Hey there, Grumpy Old Fart here. This is a compilation video of some of my greatest hits. Hope y'all enjoy them. Teamwork and planning. And this is more for the players than it is for the Dungeon Master. Although, I guess the Dungeon Master could gain something from this as well. Okay, I started playing D&D back in the 70s. I started running Advanced Dungeons & Dragons back in 1979. I've been playing role-playing games for 47 years. I've seen lots of gaming groups over the years, and it still to this day baffles me that so many players don't understand that these games are based on the concept of teamwork. As a dungeon master or game master, I create adventures and challenges that the group must overcome. They're geared for the group. If I tailored the bad guys so one PC could defeat them, the game would be boring because the group would pounce on them and kill them. As a dungeon master, you have to gear the bad guys for the group. If the group doesn't use teamwork, then they stand a pretty good chance of getting beat. I designed the bad guys to be able to defeat the group as a whole. If the players choose to act independently and not as a team, some or all of them will be making up new characters. No one character can do everything. Let's look at a basic situation in most advanced Dungeons & Dragons games. Camping. You're traveling, you have to camp at night, right? Or at some point you gotta sleep, so that's where the camping comes in. Fighter types can set up the camp and stand guard. Rangers can hunt for food if needed. Thief and assassin characters can find firewood and stand guard. Magic users and illusionists can cook and perform menial duties. Clerics can tend wounded if necessary and perform menial duties. Druids can find food and care for the horses and animals. Other animals. Now, this is a basic thing here, because the reason you don't want your spellcaster standing guard is because they have to have sleep in order to cast their spells the next day. If the wizard and the cleric, if the magic users, illusionists, clerics, and druids are standing guard like the others, then they don't get enough sleep. They can't use spells the next day. You seriously limit them. They're essentially you without spells. What is a magic user without spells? What is a cleric without spells? You see what I'm saying? They have to be able to sleep. So therefore, if you can avoid it, you don't want the wizards or the clerics or the druids or the illusionists standing guard. So the fighters assume the duties, and the fighters and thieves and assassins assume the duties of guards. Now, a lot of player characters are saying, "Well, that's not fair." Well, it depends. Do you want to have fireballs the next day? Do you want your cleric to be able to heal you the next day? Then you're going to have to suck it up and do the job. It's called teamwork. How's that saying go? There's a guy I like on YouTube called the Fat Electrician. Teamwork makes the dream work. If you get a chance to watch the Fat Electrician do it, he's awesome. My point is, there are assumed roles when you're camping in any Dungeons and Dragons game. Because the spellcasters need sleep, the fighters and the thieves are the ones to stand guard. Now, if you don't have enough people, and everybody needs to get some sleep, obviously. The fighters can't stand guard all night and then travel all day. They need sleep as well. But if you're gonna stay for an extended period of time, and it turns out that the wizards, the spellcasters, have to get They have to get 8 hours of sleep. Have them stand guard at the beginning. That way they can get their hour or two or whatever guard duty done, and then let them get 8 hours of sleep. That way they're fresh for the next day. You see what I'm saying? Either way you want to work it, it's fine. Or you can have them stand guard last. They get their 8 hours of sleep, get up, memorize or pray for spells or whatever, and then let them stand guard while the fighters sleep. You see what I'm saying? There's ways to do it. But you have to, the teamwork has to be there. Because if the fighters are forcing the wizards to stand guard just like them, they're not going to have much. The spellcasters are going to be useless the next day. And that's roughly half of your firepower gone. You see what I'm saying? Rangers and druids are both excellent in wooded or wilderness areas, but with different philosophies. Rangers live off the land, kind of like mountain men, while nature helps druids. I did a video called The Ultimate Survivors. Go check that one out. Spellcasters need to sleep for spells, so they cannot stand guard unless the party is small. They must. But they should stand guard first or last. I already mentioned that. Okay. Got ahead of myself a little bit. All right. Thieves and assassins. This is going to sound bad, but thieves and assassins are virtually useless in a camping situation. They're great when it comes to finding traps and sneaking into places and like that. Picking pockets. You know, the thief stuff. They're great at that. But in a camp situation, there's nobody to steal from unless they're stealing from the party, and that's not teamwork. So they're virtually useless in a camp. So they can stand guard and do menial tasks like collect firewood and maybe do a little scouting around to make sure the place is safe, that kind of thing. Now keep in mind, this example is not intended to demean or belittle certain character classes, but rather it is intended to illustrate that each situation is different and the various classes have limited functions as individuals. Let's look at a different situation. Defending a bridge against a horde of orcs. Fighter types would hold the front ranks with their heavy melee weapons. Rangers would be behind the fighters, maybe in an elevated position with a bow. Rangers can certainly fight up front, but they're better with the bow. So, thieves and assassins would disappear trying to find opportunities to sneak attack key enemy targets. Maybe climb under the bridge and get behind the enemy to come and attack their commander or something like that. That's where thieves and assassins excel. Magic users and illusionists would be in the rear casting area effect spells like fireballs, for example. A horde of orcs charging a bridge, a fireball erupts in their midst, that's a bunch of them down. I'm just saying. Most orcs have, I want to say they're 2 hit die critters, 1 or 2 hit die critters, as I recall. I hardly run orcs because they're kind of old hat. Everybody's used to them, so I don't run them very much. But my point is, they're 1 or 2 hit die critters. Your minimum fireball is 5 hit dice. So chances are a fireball is going to kill a buttload of them. Okay? Clerics would be behind the fighters to keep them healthy using healing spells. While casting spells into the horde like blade barriers and flame strikes. Blade barriers are awesome. If the horde is charging and a blade barrier appears across the front of the bridge, they have to go through the blade barrier to get to the group. That's an excellent way to defend the bridge. You see what I'm saying? And flame strikes are nothing to laugh at either. A big roaring column of flame shoots down out of the sky and smacks them. I mean, there are ways to make characters useful. Druids would employ nature to assault the enemy. Imagine the groups on the bridge fighting to defend the bridge, the hordes attacking one end of the bridge, right? And at the back of the group of orcs, the wolves are attacking them. Birds are attacking them, dive bombing them, dropping rocks on them, doing whatever. A small rock dropped from a high altitude makes a really great projectile. If you don't believe me, check out Narnia. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, or is it the next one? The one where they had the big battle. My contention is every character can be useful in a battle. You just have to know how to do it. Druids send swarms of insects after the enemy. Nature rises up against them. I don't care who you are, that's impressive. But do you understand what I'm talking about? Every class has its uses, and they are all different. In a tunnel or passage, dwarven fighters would be in the front, while human fighters would be directly behind them. This allows the humans to attack the enemy over the heads of their dwarven friends, maybe with pole arms. You know, the dwarves are down there with their axes and short swords and hammers and whatever, attacking the lower portion of the front ranks of the enemy, while directly behind them, the taller party members have weapons and they're attacking above the heads of the dwarves. It's common sense. These are only examples. Each player group is different, and the players must find the best way for their individual characters to be useful and effective. Furthermore, if several players find ways for their characters to act in concert for specific effects, their battles will go much more smoothly. For example, thieves throwing flasks of oil and rangers or other archers employing flaming arrows. You see what I'm saying? If a thief throws a flask of oil, or even a Molotov cocktail, can be useful. But my contention is, taking a flask of oil and turning it into a Molotov cocktail takes time. It's faster and easier to have an archer in the back light a fire arrow, a flaming arrow, and in the front ranks, people are throwing flasks of oil. The flasks shatter on impact and spread oil all over. One flaming arrow will take out the whole passageway. You see what I'm saying? The whole point is to be as effective as possible as a group. Teamwork means the whole is greater than the sum of the individual parts. If you have 5 characters in a group and each one's arbitrarily rated at a 5, you have 5 characters rated at 5, that's 25. But if you, as a group, if you can act as 40, that's better, because the characters work together. That's teamwork. Another aspect of teamwork is playing smarter than your opponents. In this case, it's playing smarter than the DM's bad guys. The Dungeon Master is obligated to play the bad guys according to their intelligence and their capabilities. If he's playing an orc like a super genius, yeah, he's not doing it right. If he's playing, on the other end of the scale, by the way, if he's playing a powerful wizard, like a the Ugg kill kind of type, then yeah, he's doing that wrong too. He's got to play the characters, the NPCs, according to their intelligences and their capabilities. I know a Dungeon Master. Basically, this guy used bandits all the time. He loved sending bandits against the group. But he never gave them missile weapons. Not one bandit had a bow or a sling. The players figured out that their bows were very effective, because once they saw the bandits, everybody grab your bows. By the time the bandits got there, they were in no shape to fight. You see what I'm saying? Another group lured a demon onto holy ground to do battle where the evil creature had serious problems, lots and lots of minuses and detriments, and that was a good team-oriented action for the players, because it gave the enemy minuses and allowed them to be at their best. Another aspect of teamwork is planning. Too many groups just kick the door in and kill everything in the room. Now, don't get me wrong, sometimes kicking the door down and killing everything in the room is a good plan. But many times it does more harm than good. A successful group has plans and procedures for most occasions. Thieves flank the enemy, fighters start hacking, clerics heal friendlies and protect the flanks, wizards zop the bad guys with whatever spells they can do. This is an oversimplified plan, but at least it's a plan. Too many times, player characters get in each other's way and end up killing each other by accident. And I'm not talking about fumbles where you roll a 1. I'm talking about... I've lost count of the number of times that a magic user casts a fireball on the bad guy while four party members are in melee combat with that bad guy. Go check out my video, Check Your Fire. You're up there hacking and slashing the bad guy, you and your 3 buddies, and so the magic user way back there casts a fireball on the bad guy. Yeah, fireball's an area of effect. He got you as well as the bad guy. You see what I'm saying? Now, the last thing I want to talk about in this video is players fighting each other. This is beyond detrimental. It's stupid. If a player character is under the mental control of a bad guy, I just did a video called about the Hellcat. You see what I'm saying? If that thing is influencing somebody and you want to get him out of that, you know, there are better ways to deal with the situation than killing him. You see what I'm saying? If two or more player characters just don't get along, there's no reason they should be in the same party. Party members have to at least get along. They don't have to be bosom buddies, but just don't hack each other to death. Don't slit throats in their sleep. I actually had that happen. I was running a game, and see, this is the sad part. As a dungeon master, you're limited by what you can't do. You're limited by... You can't tell the player characters what to do. You can only judge the situation, create scenarios, judge the situation, and wait for the outcome. That's, as a dungeon master, that's all you can do. You cannot force a player to do something or to not do something. So, when they camped at night, the assassin in the group didn't like one particular character, so he slit his throat and robbed him blind in the middle of the night. In the morning, the other players were like, okay, he can make up a new character. What the hell is that? Everybody got minuses there. Specifically that assassin. But everybody got minuses there. Because if you're in a party, a group of people traveling together for a specific goal, and one party member kills another party member in their sleep to rob them, yeah, that in that scenario, the assassin needed to die. If you're traveling with him after that, you're just freaking stupid. Okay? When party members fight each other, the bad guys automatically win and the mission fails. It's just the way it is. If you can't get along with somebody in game, then you need a different character that can get along with them. Somebody needs to make a new character. If you're bringing your real life dislike for a specific person into the game, you don't need to be playing in that game with that person. Party members have to at least get along. If they don't, there's no reason they should be traveling together. Find a different group to play with. And I'm not trying to say break up the group. I'm saying in Dungeons & Dragons, you're playing the part of a character. This character is not you. This character may get along well with an evil assassin. You never know. My contention is if Joe is running, Larry the Barbarian, and Frank is running Bob the Thief, and Bob the Thief and Larry the Barbarian don't get along, then that's one thing. The characters don't get along. They shouldn't be in the same group. If the players don't get along, why are they in the same group playing? You see what I'm saying? It doesn't make any sense. Dungeons & Dragons is designed as a team game. That's why all the players have different abilities. If you don't get along with the person in the game, why are you playing? If you can set aside those differences for the length of the game, great. Amen. But don't bring it into the game. If you do that, you eliminate all vestiges of teamwork, and you're eliminating the fun of the game. The assassin in the example I gave earlier, that assassin destroyed any semblance of trust and teamwork in the game. All for, I want to say he ended up getting about 40 gold and a gemstone worth about 10 gold. So altogether 50 gold. But he destroyed he destroyed party harmony. Okay, with that one act. And nobody called him on it. It was crazy. There's no reason for that. Whenever you're playing a game like this, teamwork is essential. If you can't at least try to use teamwork, yeah, you're not playing it right. They always say there's no wrong way to play D&D. This is the one way that is wrong. If you're bringing outside beefs into the game, yeah, that'll destroy the game. That's wrong. Look, I know this video was kind of all over the place. I intended it to be a more instructional video, so I hope somebody got something out of this. But when you have players who don't get along, constantly fight each other in game, constantly arguing with each other, it destroys the fun of the game. On top of that, this happened to me a lot. I had a player who had a beef with another player with another player outside of the game, and this one player was constantly coming to me with, "Oh, you should kick him out of the game. You should do this. You should do that. You should kick him." And I'm like, dude, he hasn't done anything. I can't punish somebody for something you think that they did 5 years ago outside of the game. And this dude got mad and quit, which was okay because then we continued playing. Played with literally thousands of people. Usually most players try to create a character that can stand alone and is a survivor. And that's a good thing. I'm not disputing that. Dungeons and Dragons is designed as a team game, but a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. So each individual character should be as capable and survivable as possible. No arguments. But beyond that, players should find ways to help each other out in combat. Now, I'm not talking about healing each other after the battle. I'm talking about how the mage can help the cleric or the fighters, or how the thief can help the mage during combat. Okay? There's other ways outside of combat. For example, a wizard can create magic items for people. It is a lengthy process. I can see players loaning each other money or even giving each other money to purchase necessary magic items, or pooling their money to get something that the group needs. That's another way to help. What I'm talking about is actually helping in combat. Now, I've seen players... In this game, I have seen a variety of different players. I've seen players so selfish that they actually attack each other in the game or undermine each other in the game on a lark, just on a whim. One of the alignments that I absolutely hate is chaotic neutral, because chaotic neutral, many players see that as license to do anything they want, and when you question them, "Oh, that's my alignment, I'm chaotic neutral." I hate that. I at one point, for the biggest campaign I ever ran, I didn't allow any chaotic neutrals in the game, simply for that reason. Now, that being said, players should always try to help each other during combat, if necessary. If you can't hurt the bad guy, maybe you can help somebody else hurt the bad guy. Okay? I'll give you a couple of examples. The other day, my son was running a game. My wife and I were playing. My mage cast haste on her fighter to double her number of attacks. She sliced and diced this guy up pretty handily. Okay? In actuality, I gotta be honest here, we were running Oriental Adventures, so my character was a Wu Jin, her character was a samurai, but it worked out the same. You see what I'm saying? I've seen wizards cast silence and invisibility on thieves to allow them to get a necessary, needed back attack on the bad guy. Clerics' use of protection from evil on the fighters can help them last longer against all manner of evil creatures. A variety of spells cast on fighter types can really enhance their frontline capabilities, of course, depending on the situation. For example, improved invisibility. There's invisibility and then there's improved invisibility. Invisibility lasts until you attack someone. When you attack someone, your invisibility goes away. Okay? Other people can attack you, your invisibility stays, but once you attack, your invisibility goes away. So it's essentially a one-shot thing for a fighter. It's good for thieves who need to get that initial back attack, but improved invisibility is much better because if you cast that on a fighter, they can attack all day long and not become visible. You see what I'm saying? Works out pretty good. Another good one for fighters who need to get in close is Stone Skin. Strength for clerics, Bless. Enchanted weapons. If for example, the fighter's going against a bad guy and he doesn't have a magic weapon, you can cast enchanted weapon on his weapon, and he gives him a +1 until the spell wears off. Enlarge is another good one because it increases the damage potential. Fly. Imagine a fighter with a bow who can fly. You see what I'm saying? Keeps him out of range and he can smack the crap out of the bad guy. True Seeing is also good because it keeps the fighters from being fooled, I guess, tricked. Excuse me. These are just a few of the examples spellcasters can employ. Non-spellcasters can also help each other. For example, a thief can gain surprise if the target is somehow distracted, perhaps by a fighter taunting the villain, or attacking him outright up front. The fighter's attacking him, the bad guy's attention is on him, the thief can sneak around and get in to get that back attack. The possibilities and options are far too numerous to list them all here. Suffice it to say that several characters acting on each other's behalf can be far more effective than when they act singly. I heard this definition of teamwork years ago, and I want to share it with you guys here. This is for players and dungeon masters alike. Pay close attention. This is a really good definition. For teamwork, ready? The whole is greater than the sum of the individual parts. Let me say that again. The whole is greater than the sum of the individual parts. That in and of itself tells you everything you need to know about proper teamwork. A group of players acting with teamwork can achieve far more than those characters just acting individually. Helping other player characters is literally helping yourself. It is a team game. So don't let people tell you otherwise. My group had 5 players, and for whatever reason, they refused to do anything but kill things. I would say they were murder hobos, but they didn't rob anyone. They just killed. Well, except for the thief, as I recall. The thief tried to loot the bodies, but nobody else did. I guess the thief would be considered a murder hobo. At any rate, the fighter was of the Ugg Kill variety. The wizard delighted in area effect spells. It was like he was surprised he could do it and just wanted to keep doing it. Like fireballs and things like that. The cleric wanted to fill the afterlife to bolster his deity's armies. At least that's what it seemed like. He never actually mentioned it. He just liked killing things. The cleric liked killing things. The thief was more interested in looting dead bodies rather than picking pockets, so he was killing people and then looting them. I don't think he ever picked pockets one time. The barbarian was fixated on killing and killing and then killing and then killing some more, and then he'd go to work killing. Yeah, they were all 8th levels, so they had the power to do it. Excuse me. Now, at the beginning of the game, I do what I always do. I asked them what kind of game they wanted, and to a man, they all said, "We want a long game where we defeat the villains and save the world." That was their mantra. Consequently, I designed a long campaign where an evil cleric was sending henchmen for clues to find a powerful staff which would let him rule the world. It was a waste of time. The player characters killed every henchman they found, along with all of his underlings, their horses, the local villagers, all of the livestock, and anything else they could find. At one point, the wizard used multiple fireballs to even destroy the local village's crops. After the village had been slaughtered, of course. They weren't looking for clues. They weren't trying to find out why these henchmen were doing what they were doing. There was no investigative process whatsoever. It was literally mindless slaughter. After 4 such encounters, the local kingdom... Now, I run a lawful campaign, so keep that in mind. After 4 such encounters, the local kingdom figured out who was laying waste to the countryside, and they sent the army after the group. Now the group they were good players. They had capabilities. They were able to avoid them for about 2 weeks in game time until the army caught up to them. After the player characters were all dead, the players congratulated themselves and each other on a great and successful game and started rolling up new characters. You really can't make that shit up. The next game was easy for me to run because there was virtually no planning. Just a few quick roll NPCs, somebody to throw into the pot to be slaughtered. And these guys, they did this several more times, and it was crazy. They just kept doing it over and over and over. The roles changed because this guy next time, the guy who was running the fighter next time, I think he rolled a cleric. The guy who was running the thief became a barbarian, that kind of thing. So the roles changed, but the mindset was exactly the same. That whole group literally had a one-track mind. It was after the next campaign. That's what it was. Because they did it. Let's see. They did that one, then they did another one, and then they did another one, and then they did one after that when a friend of mine came and joined the group, and he started asking questions, and the other players, began asking questions and wondering why this guy was asking questions. Apparently, they had played with a dungeon master. That's all they did was kill things. They ran around the countryside slaughtering everything. When my friend Gerald came into the group, he started asking questions. Why are they doing this? What's their purpose? They got to have a motive. I mean, come on. And that got the rest of them to thinking. So there's an old adage where one bad apple can ruin a barrel. Well, maybe one good apple saved the barrel. Unwise decisions. Yeah, everybody has run across these. There are players in the game who I don't know if they either don't know the rules or they milk a rule and the dungeon master allows them to get away with it, or they just don't take into account consequences. I don't know. I don't know what but there's a million different unwise decisions a player can make. The purpose of this video is to tell players and dungeon masters to consider the consequences before they make rash decisions, or to be sure and read the rules before you try to do something, because you'll see what I'm talking about. I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, for almost a half century. I've been running it since 1979. I've seen all manner of players and dungeon masters over the years. Many of them were great players. But with any group, you come across some clunkers from time to time. Years ago, I was playing in a game with my friend Randy. I was not the dungeon master. We joined into this guy's game. Another player named Don sat down with a pair of 3-ring binders. I mean, he had just thick binders full of stuff. I figured he took really great notes, or maybe he was one of those players who documented every nuance and tiny detail of their character's backstory. Maybe he was mapping the whole place. I don't know. During the course of the game, Don produced copious and startling amounts of magic items, potions, scrolls. This guy had everything under the sun and a few things from the dark side. He had everything and mass quantities of them. I jokingly asked if he had a wagon hidden somewhere, and he said, no, 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 no. He rather had 14 portable holes. I was shocked. 14, one player character with 14 portable holes. I was shocked. I asked where he kept them, and he kept all of them. And he replied, "Oh, I keep them in my bag of holding." Yeah. Sad part was that the dungeon master allowed him to do it. Yeah. Uh, that's I got nothing for that. There's no excuse for that. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I did a video on bags of holding and portable holes. Go check that out. Um, my son told me a story from his game where one of his players, running a lawful good paladin, murdered a child to prove his god could revive it. The child or the village beat him down and they crucified him to their god. And rightly so. I mean, a lawful good paladin that murders a child just to prove that his god could revive it. Yeah, that don't cut it. I'm sorry. My opinion, they got off easy. Um, in my wife's game once, the group was staying overnight in an Amazon tribe's village. Amazon, the women warriors. We were staying overnight in an Amazon tribe's village. They seemed welcoming enough and all was going well. And that is until one of our player characters decided that since he was a barbarian, he should also be a caveman and a savage. His character tried to sexually assault the queen of the village, right in front of the group and in front of the entire village. The entire group intervened and hacked the son of a bitch to death, and rightly so. Our characters were not uberly high level, but we could not have taken that village. Even if we were so inclined to allow him to continue, which we weren't, yeah, that wasn't happening. Then there was Tony. Tony was, for all intents and purposes, a homicidal maniac. Everywhere the group went, Tony left dead bodies. And he wasn't a murder hobo. Murder hobos take things. He didn't rob the people that he killed. He was just a murderous engine of destruction. Finally, he went into a tavern and, for absolutely no reason, attacked the barkeeper, the bartender. There were 20 or so patrons, and they saw him trying to murder their friend. They all attacked him. He killed 2 of them and fled out the door, followed by more than a dozen pissed-off townspeople, screaming for the city guard. Between the townspeople and the city guard, Tony did not last long. And the sad part is, that little shit had the gall to look at me and say, that wasn't fair. What the hell do you think was going to happen? Jesus Christ. Supplies. This may seem like a trivial thing to make a video about, but I had an interesting thing happen the other day. My son lamented to me that his D&D group that he runs a game. They never seem to understand that when you go into a dungeon with a group of player characters, you have to bring whatever you need, because you can never guarantee that you will or won't find in a, you can never guarantee what you will or won't find in a dungeon crawl. My son runs 5th edition D&D, and his group spent an inordinate amount of time in a town prior to the dungeon crawl, and nobody bothered to stock up on supplies. So, several days into the dungeon crawl, he asks, "So, how's your food holding up?" "What? Food? What do you mean?" "Food. You've got to be eating something." "Well, I don't have any food." "Well, do you?" "Don't know. I don't have any food." That kind of thing. I was reminded of a group that I was running about 20 years ago. I was the dungeon master. I was running this group. They each had between 2 and 3 weeks of food, a couple of water skins, and reasonably appropriate weaponry and missile ammo. Then they started the dungeon crawl, which they didn't know it at the time, and they did something unexpected. I didn't realize they were going to take a turn and find this particular item. But because of this, it was a surprise to me as well. But since I have the world all mapped out, I got to go where they go. I'm the dungeon master. I can't tell them what to do. They do it. The world reacts. This turned into a major excursion into the Underdark. The tunnels were sparse, and had no vegetation. They ran into an underground stream, which kept them hydrated for about the first month or so, and that was cool. And they had some fish there, but, nothing major. After that, they were in deep kimchi. They had a battle with some deep gnomes, and out of necessity, they developed a few recipes for a leg of gnome. After the 4th month, the group actually turned to cannibalism. Yeah, things got hairy after that. Nobody even mentioned turning back. That's the key. One thing as a player that you have to do is make sure you have iron rations which don't go bad. Standard rations are great, they taste good, but they go bad after a week. Iron rations last virtually forever. That's why they cost more. You have to have water, you have to have arrows, and other consumable items that you may need. If you go to half rations, 10 days of food becomes 20 days. And that's, you can do that. Food can be stretched to some degree. Water is something that you cannot stretch. At most, a water skin will last a human being 5 to 6 days, and that's really pushing it. We're talking pushing it to the wall there. Under normal conditions, a water skin will last a human 2 days. As a dungeon master, make sure your players are keeping careful track of their food, water, arrows that they shoot, etc. A bow without arrows is virtually useless, except as a fire starter. A sling without stones or bullets is even less useful. I guess you could use it as a garrote, maybe? That's the only thing. Make bootlaces for, I don't know. Also, since money in the game is generally in coin form, most player characters will not be carrying a lot of currency. While on a quest or mission, make sure your player characters are keeping track of that as well, because they can only carry so much. And if they're carrying gear, it lowers the amount of money they can carry. If they're carrying a buttload of money, they're not carrying a whole lot of gear. You see what I'm saying? My advice to my son was very simple. If they don't have it, they can't use it. If that costs a player character or 3 their lives, so be it. They will learn eventually to hit the shops and stock up beforehand, before they leave town. Hunting, fishing, and foraging are useful skills to have. Now, in my players' situation earlier, the stone walls were stone walls. There was no vegetation. There were no roots. There were no mushrooms. There was nothing they could eat. We're talking bare stone. They had to turn to cannibalism. There was nothing to hunt. There was no fishing. After they left that stream, there was no fishing. And there was nothing to forage. So, but if you're out in the woods or out in the wilderness, or you have something that you can hunt, forage, or fish, then there you go. Those are useful skills. Clerics can create food, but if you're relying on that, you have planned poorly. Here's something to consider, especially if you're in a dungeon crawl, spelunking in the Underdark. If you've been in the Underdark for a month or more, every intelligent denizen that's there knows that you are probably relying on that cleric for food. So he becomes a target. Why? It's common sense. Also, most denizens of the underworld, of the Underdark, worship their own gods. So clerics from the surface would be an affront to their faith. Druids would be a bit more acceptable to them, but I don't know, maybe not by much, I don't know. Just depends on the god. But my contention is, if you run into a bunch of drow and you have a cleric of Thor, yeah, that dude's a target. Because Lolth hates other pantheons, I'm just saying. And as theological as drow elves are, yeah, they're going to attack that guy forthwith. Just saying. Beasts of burden can be useful because as your food runs out, they can be slaughtered. And it's going to sound bad, but horse meat, as well as mule and donkey, is delicious. If prepared properly. Just food for thought. Some underground areas with streams and wells are damp. This is another thing to consider. This means there's plenty of water. It also means that metal implements, such as weapons and armor, are more susceptible to rust. Oil becomes imperative. Oil is a weight that you have to carry. It has encumbrance value. Also, take note of how long torches and lanterns last. Characters without infravision will be really screwed without a light source. Check out my advanced Dungeons and Dragons hack video on flashlights. Just a few things to think about when your group heads into the darkness. Oil. I went down the list here in the player's handbook, and I just started listing stuff. So, in no particular order. Here we go. Oil. Magical weapons and armor do not rust. Non-magical metal objects do rust. Period. In my games, 1 flask of oil will last a character with metal armor and weapons 1 week. Oil is also useful to start fires as Molotov cocktails. If you are in the wilderness and you have oil and the wood is not exactly completely dry, or you're having a hard time getting started, you can soak some of the logs, some of the pieces of wood, the fuel, in oil and put it within, underneath and within the fire pile, I guess, for lack of a better word. And that way, when your kindling touches, that oil goes up and it'll burn, and it helps the fire go. I've seen people in real life do that with motor oil. So, clothing. People rarely buy clothes. I have lost count of the number of players who went into battle wearing armor but no clothing underneath it. That shit chafes, people. That's all I'm saying. Clothing, dress for the weather. Characters in the Arctic with armor and no cloak or heavy furs are going to die. That's just, they're going to freeze to death. And they're not going to be able to fight well either. Hot sand sucks if you have no footwear, and rain-soaked characters with no cloaks are miserable. I give minuses for people who don't do that. That's just me, though. But there are a lot of DMs who don't, who just ignore that. They don't care. I prefer a little more realism. Horses. Walking everywhere sucks. And now I got to put a caveat to that. Most players in my games don't bother with horses. The reason being, I'm on a battlefield, my mindset is expediency, efficiency, effectiveness. If you have the enemy on horseback, they are much more effective. First rule is to kill the horses. I have lost count on the number of players in my game who have complained, "What's the point of buying horses? You just kill them off." Well, if wild animals are attacking the group, the horses are probably an easier target. At camp at night, the horses are probably an easier target than the camp itself. As I said, on a battlefield, kill the horses. The knights on foot are easy pickings. If you're being chased, you're on horseback and the enemy's on horseback and they're chasing you across land, overland type thing, shoot their horses with arrows. They're on foot, they can't chase you anymore. I mean, if you can hit them, great, but shooting the horses is just good because you can outrun them. A courier who's delivering a message that you don't want delivered, shoot his horse. He's easy pickings after that. It sounds bad, but it's true. And on top of that, after the battle, you've got plenty of fresh meat. It's not nice. But when your life is at stake, being nice gets you killed. And I play D&D as try to make it as realistic as possible. Here we go. Backpacks. Pouches, bags, quivers, boxes, chests, and saddlebags. Containers are necessary to carry things like arrows, provisions, and other necessities. Again, I have lost count of the number of players whose characters buy everything they need but have no way to carry it all. It won't all fit in your pockets, people. You got to have at least a backpack, something. Otherwise, you tie it all together with your rope, and it's hanging off your shoulder or whatever. Which actually theoretically can be good because when combat breaks out, you just drop it and draw your weapon. But still, it's better to have a backpack or something. And if you have horses, saddlebags are wonderful because you ain't got to carry everything. Just saying. Not everything fits in your pockets. Candles, lanterns, and torches. Light is a good thing, especially underground. Infravision is nice, but humans don't have it. So unless you have a way to give yourself infravision, or if you're, if you have magical spells that give you light, that's cool. But usually torches and lanterns and like that, candles are quite nice. Check out my video, my AD&D hack, the flashlights. Yeah, check that out. Rope. Helpful for climbing, belaying, and in all manner of utilitarian uses. People say, well, I'm going to tie this to that. Using what? Well, I have rope. Really? Show me. Damn, I forgot to buy it. That kind of thing. Rope is always useful. It has 1,000 uses, and anybody who doesn't get rope is an idiot. That's all I'm saying. Skin for water or wine. Water is a necessity. Being able to carry said water is also a necessity. Wine is nice, and the skin can be filled with water after the wine is finished. It's the same, excuse me, it's the same container. It's just one's filled with wine, one's filled with water. If you drink all the wine, you now have a second water skin. You see what I'm saying? A lot of people finish the wine and throw it away or disregard it. I was playing in a game where a guy had 4 flasks of wine because he wanted to stay drunk the entire time during the trip. And they ran afoul of something. I don't recall what it was, but they ended up having to spend a lot more time in the wilderness. And this guy says, he kept complaining, I only have one water skin. I only have one water skin. Well, didn't you drink all your wine? Yeah, but I only have one water skin. It's the same container, dipshit. No, people don't understand that. I mean, in a real world situation, he could have seen, gee, I've got these extra containers. We can fill them up with water at the next river. But it's just one of those things. Thieves' picks and tools. A thief without these will find it exceedingly difficult to defeat anything but the most basic traps or locks. In my world, a thief without thieves' picks and tools incurs huge penalties on their pick locks and find and remove trap skills. Find and remove traps. Fart. Their fart skill, yeah. The exact penalty depends on the complexity of the trap or lock, and I try to make an informed judgment call on that. But without thieves' picks and tools, thieves find a very difficult time of it. That's all I'm saying. Spikes, not a necessity, but can be exceedingly useful in a variety of situations. You have a hammer and some spikes. You're being chased by the bad guy. Slam the door behind you. Drive a spike in there to into the floor. Keep that door shut while you make your getaway. You have to climb. You have to move from point A to point B, and you have to secure. It's across a chasm, and you have to, you can lasso something over there that's heavy, and that's cool. Or something that won't budge, and you've got that in anchor, but you need to anchor it to something, drive a spike and anchor it on there. Yeah, spikes are exceedingly useful. They're not a necessity, but they are definitely useful. A tinderbox. Oh my God, flint and steel used on tinder is how a fire is started. Spellcasters can use spells, but it's rather drastic. Matches do not exist in advanced Dungeons and Dragons. In later editions, they have tinder twigs and things like that. And if you have like a magnifying glass, you can use the sun's rays to start a fire. That's cool. But generally speaking, a tinderbox is the way to go. Flint and steel in that tinderbox is an essential. People go, well, we're going to start a fire. How are you going to do it? Yeah, you got to buy a tinderbox. Have it as a backup, if nothing else. I have seen players, because it's got flint and steel in there, and that stuff is fairly heavy, in a wooden box that's sturdy. Yeah, I know a player character who had lost his weapon, and the only thing he had on him at the time was a tinderbox, and he used that as a weapon and bashed the bad guy in the head. Was able to get that guy's weapon and continue the fight. So yeah, it's not what you got, it's how you use it, people. Tinderbox, very, very important. Alcoholic beverages. Wine is not an antiseptic. It is not, no alcoholic beverage listed in the player's handbook can be used as an antiseptic. However, it can be used to treat minor ailments like strep throat, colds, and some blood disorders. Ales and beers do not contain enough alcohol to serve as an antiseptic either. In my world, this is the way I play it. In my world, wine-soaked bandages can help to prevent infection, but they're useless if the infection already exists. So if you take a hit and you don't bind your wounds or do anything like that, you have a chance of infection setting in. And if that infection sets in, yeah, you're going to need magical healing because penicillin don't exist. There are no antibiotics. If you want to sterilize something, yeah, ales and beers are pretty good for that. Wine is okay, but it's not great. But if you have an infection, you're going to need magical healing. Wine-soaked bandages in my world can, and it works the same with beer and ale and like that, but they can prevent an infection if you don't already have one. But if you do have one, yeah, you need magical healing. Alcoholic beverages do function as painkillers. You get a guy drunk enough, he passes out, you can perform surgery and he won't know. So, religious items. Useful for clerics. Some clerical spells require holy symbols as components. Keep that in mind. If you're a cleric, you really want to invest in some religious paraphernalia. It's always useful for you. The other characters, it's not so important. It depends on your backstory and if you are a religious character, but for clerics, it's a necessity. Tack and harness. If you want to be an effective combatant from horseback, saddles and bridles help. In a pinch, a horse can be ridden bareback, but it ain't easy. Requires a lot of leg strength, and it's better with a saddle. That's all I'm saying. Transport. Traveling from point A to point B sometimes requires a form of transport, be it a horse or whatever. Buying passage on a ship or in a caravan is a lot cheaper than purchasing a ship or a wagon or a horse. I generally charge 2 silver pieces per character per day, and this covers 1 basic meal per day. Sometimes fighters can hire on as guards, and other player characters can hire on to caravans in various capacities. Clerics are always useful. If your character can cook, that's always useful in any caravan. On board ship as well. Just saying. Characters who know sailing or ocean vessels can hire on as sailors. Hiring on nets you a paycheck as well as travel from here to there. And you don't have to pay for passage if you work there. Word to the wise. I had a player in one of my games. They came to a ferry, and it was one of those ferries where there was a rope across the river, and the guy's gonna pull the boat back and forth. And that was cool. But the player character didn't have any money, and he said, "Well, what I'll do is I'll pull the boat to the other side. That way, you won't need to work, and I'll earn my way." And the ferryman, who had a buttload of cargo to load, said, "Sure, let me load this cargo first." So, it works out. Every player character, as soon as possible in game time, needs to learn basic first aid. Clerics, monks, barbarians, rangers, and druids all know basic first aid as part of their training in my world. They should teach this to the other player characters as soon as possible. Basic first aid includes tourniquets, binding wounds, cauterizing wounds, and how to treat wounds and illnesses. Rations include smoked or salted meat, which can be used for soup or stews, which are great in the cold. One of the most important and often overlooked concepts in the game is haggling. I did an entire video on that. Go check it out. Many players hear a price and they pay it without thinking. When you're buying supplies, always haggle. As a dungeon master, I have robbed player characters of their hard-earned coins by upping the prices. The sad part is that many players either don't pay attention to the cost, they don't subtract spent coins, or they feel that because the dungeon master is the shopkeeper quoted a price, then that was it. Being frugal in my game is just being smart. If you can get away with paying 5 gold instead of 8, do it. Not subtracting spent coins is cheating, just like fudging die rolls or changing stats on your character. It's cheating. If you spend money, you have to subtract it. Players who don't think the dungeon master will try to screw them over are just stupid and deserve to be fleeced. In my world, when a player character buys supplies at the beginning, when they first create their character and they're buying stuff, they pay book price. After that, I haggle. So when you're buying supplies during the game, try to haggle. Because if you can get a cheaper price, do it. When a player character buys supplies, all this needs to be taken into consideration. In my game, I haggle every single chance, and my players love it because it gives them the opportunity to feel like they're in control of the situation. If they can haggle a better price and screw me out of some money, amen. If you're in my game and you've been playing a while and you go to the shop, the local shop, and he says, the shopkeeper says, well, it's going to cost you 14 gold. And you pay that 14 gold, yeah, you deserve it. So just keep in mind, supplies are important, very important, but you also have to keep in mind the dungeon master's job is to screw you over. The amount of things that players sometimes take for granted is inspiring. It's just ridiculous. Inspiring is probably the wrong word, but my contention is sometimes players take things for granted and they shouldn't. Some of my favorites, and I figured I'd give you a list here. Over the years, the amount of minutia that players in my games have taken for granted is, oh my God, staggering. Such as, how many arrows did you use? And players are like, what do you mean? They buy a bow and a dozen arrows and call it good. And so, their arrows seem to last forever because they don't keep track of their ammo. Yeah, that just annoys the living shit out of me. You shoot an arrow, you either hit the target or you miss. If you hit the target, it usually gets buried in the target, and you may be able to retrieve it. If you miss, it either hits something or sticks in something. It either hits the ground, hits a tree, hit a rock, something. The chances of it breaking are pretty reasonable. So, pretty high. It's rare that you shoot an arrow and you get it back. So players in my game, they have to keep track of those. I don't just let them get it's like the old the magazines in the movies where the hero shoots the magazine. He's got a 10-round magazine and he's shooting 100 rounds out of it. Yeah, I don't buy that. I don't do that. The next one that I put down here, this is a really good one. What do you mean my armor or my weapon is rusted? Well, they sell oil for a reason. You've never mentioned anything about taking care of it. You've never said I'm maintaining my armor. You've never said I'm oiling my weapon. Nothing like that. Guess what? They rust. What are you eating? What do you mean, what am I eating? I've got food. Where? What? I don't understand. They sell rations. How many did you buy? Oh, I got a week's worth. When? 3 months ago? Yeah. Nobody said they was hunting, buddy. You got to eat something. Or what do you mean I'm losing blood? Well, in my games, critical hits cause blood loss, and that shit adds up. So every round, every crit, you take a point of damage from that. Well, but it's been 8 rounds and I had 2 crits. Well, that's 16 points of blood loss right there. Not counting the regular hits. So, Um, what do you mean the Duke is offended? What did I do to offend him? Dude, you haven't taken a bath in a month. What? He smells you. Well, no, that's not fair. I never told you not to take a bath. Kind of ranked there. What do you mean I can't see him? It's dark. You don't have a torch. You don't have any infravision. That's a basic one because people generally understand if it's dark or whatever. That's not that big a deal, but it does happen from time to time. What happened to all my gear? I don't understand. I bought all this stuff. Yeah. And then you were camping and the monsters attacked and you fled or you chased them or whatever. Nobody mentioned anything about grabbing your gear or your backpack. It's all there. Your tent is still stuck over there, whatever. But that was a month ago. Yep, it was. Not my fault. Why am I still taking damage? Well, the dragon used his breath weapon on you and you never put yourself out. What do you mean? You're still burning. But. Stop, drop, and roll, buddy. Find a stream. Something. Anything. This is one of the big ones that gets me. What do you mean my horse died? Well, dude, you tied it to a tree when you went into those ruins, and that was a month ago. Best case scenario is that the wolves got it before it starved to death, Or, why do I have all these minuses in combat? Because, dude, it's 20 degrees below zero, and you're wearing chainmail without any cold weather gear. Do the math. Why can't I swim? Because you jumped overboard wearing plate mail. How could I possibly have contracted a disease? Dude, you've hit every brothel and pleasure house and banged every whore on the entire continent. You never once mentioned anything about a cure disease spell. I got nothing for you, man. The law of averages catches up with everybody. And, of course, the list goes on and on. Some things are a given, like players probably don't need to tell you that they're going potty. Although, in one game, I did take damage for not saying I was going to the bathroom. Yeah, that was kind of crappy. No pun intended. But some things probably need to be stipulated, like I'm going to put myself out before I burn to death. Yeah, that's kind of a given. Funny story the other day. My family and I, we play Skyrim. Skyrim is a wonderful video game. If you've not played it, I recommend it. It's quite fun. It's great to pass the time. You get to build a character, the whole 9 yards, and it's really good. It's kind of a D&D based thing. My wife was playing in Skyrim, and she was on one of those. There's quests you can go on, and she was on one of those fishing quests. She had to collect all these rare fish and bring them back, and blah 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 blah. I never do those. I'm more into the cleaning out areas, getting rid of the bandits and getting their loot, that kind of thing. Anyway, during this fishing quest, she came upon a group of bandits, and one of the first one she came across was asleep in an old wreck of a ship. And she went to smack him with her sword because it's a bandit. You can kill those. Nobody cares about that, right? She went to smack him and didn't realize she was still holding her fishing rod. So this guy's laying there asleep, and she runs up and smacks him with a fishing rod. Oh my God. Talk about a rude awakening, right? My son from the other room, he yells out, "Wake your ass up!" Oh, yeah, that was funny. And stuff like that happens to everybody. It's not just the wife. She's awesome. She's much better at these games than I am. But everybody forgets. Everybody forgets stuff. As the dungeon master, it's your job to mediate that and general reminders at first. And you got to keep track of this. This is going to hurt if you don't. This is going to be bad if you don't do this. That kind of thing. If you've got players that have been playing a long time,
yeah, they don't need to be reminded until the shit hits the fan.
General stuff. I might do more of these. I don't know. I did a video a while back about dealing with those pesky spellcasters. I got a number of phone calls after that from old friends asking advice on how to deal with various situations. I figured I'd lump them all together into one video. So here we go. First off, regardless of whatever situation you find yourself in life and in D&D, the best tactic is to use whatever works. This is a blanket statement which covers literally any situation. Do whatever works. It's the oldest tactical principle. Do what works. Okay? If you're worried about aesthetics and you're worried about other factors, it may inhibit your ability to survive a situation. Do what works. Don't worry about aesthetics. The first one that people asked me about, my good friend Larry asked me about, was invisibility. There are two flavors of invisibility, standard and improved. Standard invisibility goes away the first time the user attacks. So they cast invisibility, they attack, they become visible. It's like a one-time surprise thing, and it works pretty good. Now, if they don't attack, they can remain invisible virtually forever, so that's a concern, but at least they're not attacking you. Once they attack using standard invisibility, they become visible. Improved invisibility lets the user stay invisible whether they attack anyone or not. So this guy can stay invisible and keep smacking you around, and he stays invisible. Excuse me. Damn it. Excuse me. It's stuck in here. It won't come out. My go-to tactic for invisibility is to buy flour or paint. Handfuls of flour thrown through an area will reveal the location of invisible creatures. Paint does the same thing. Flour is cheaper and easier to carry. So, you know, the flour coats the person, the invisible creature, and it coats the floor so you can see where they're walking. It's absolutely wonderful. And it's cheap. It's simple. You carry a bag of flour with you. Somebody invisible, you throw it out there, you're good to go. There are other ways. Water is useful, but not as useful as flour. It's got to be something that's going to cling to them, and something that's going to, on the floor, will show footprints and like that. Water, I guess, can be, depending on the area you're in. Water can be okay, but yeah, you gotta. Flour is just best, in my opinion. All right. A standard echelon or phalanx formation. Every group is different, so this you have to find out what works best for your group. But every group should have a standard echelon or phalanx formation, a standard fighting formation. No two groups of PCs are the same, so each group needs to discuss the situation. Generally, the best fighters need to be up front to engage the enemy. Thieves need to be free to maneuver for backstab opportunities and to pilfer important items as they become available. Clerics need to be around to heal the fighters, or all the PCs actually, especially after the battle. So I like to keep them in the secondary. Right behind the front rank, the second rank, behind the fighters. A quick cure light wounds here and there might be necessary during the battle for the fighters, and or maybe even a more advanced spell. But the point being, they have to be ready to help the fighters, but you don't want to put your clerics in the front ranks. That's what I'm saying. Finally, wizards are the big guns, kind of like artillery on a battlefield, so to speak. I like to keep them in the back to protect them. The clerics are decent fighters, so they can help protect the wizards from anybody who wants to get at them. From the back, the wizards will have time and protection to cast spells as needed. As I said, every group is different, so each group will have to discuss their standard combat formation. I have found usually clerics are good for defending the wizards. And the reason I do that is if the wizards are in the back and the clerics are protecting them, they're both in the back, the fighters up front. The thieves can maneuver for backstabbing opportunities. It's a good general rule of thumb. Again, every group is different, so you're going to have to figure out what works best for your group. Short fighters can be up front. Taller fighters can be right behind them with pole arms and spears. So they can attack above the dwarves' heads and the halflings' heads, that kind of thing. Again, you got to discuss it with your group and figure out what works best, because good, sound battle tactics are imperative if you're going to survive in a reasonable D&D world. Okay, I've had players who they won't. It's all willy-nilly. They just run around attacking whatever. And, of course, when my bad guys concentrate on the wizards because they're not being attacked, why are you concentrating on the wizards? Because they're your big guns. Think, As I said, every group is different, so each group is going to have to discuss their own standard combat formation, and they need to do it. Marching order. This is something that many people, in a lot of games, the dungeon master, okay, we're going to head down the hallway. Okay, I need a marching order. And every time it's different. And that may work well for your group. I have found generally a general marching order is better, because if somebody forgets to say, well, here's the marching order, then the dungeon master knows what they generally do. Marching order is the standard formation player characters use when exploring or searching areas. This is not used for general overland travel, but rather in the dungeon crawl or general spelunking, or when they're exploring the ancient ruins or whatever, that sort of thing. This is my general preference. This is my preference. And again, it may be different for your group because every group is different. This is my general preference. The best scout, which is usually a thief or a ranger, depending on the situation, would take point. Behind him should be the best fighter, followed by the rest of the fighters, except for the second best fighter. The second best fighter should be on tail sweep, guarding the rear. The last thing you want is your wizard to be bringing up the rear, and then some invisible creature attacks from the rear. The wizard gets whacked first. You see what I'm saying? You want your second best fighter in the rear, on tail sweep. The clerics and by the way, the tail sweep is a military term. That's my background. I apologize if it eludes you. The clerics and the wizards should be behind the fighters, but in front of the tail sweep. Again, every group of player characters is different, so each group needs to discuss their standard marching order. I recommend that you come up with one, whatever that is. The problem with the general marching order is if somebody dies, or if somebody's not there that night, or if somebody's... Okay, your second best fighter is your tail sweep. Well, what if he can't make it to the game that night? I use a term called ghosting. I think I've talked about it in the past. As a matter of fact, I'll talk about it right now. If a player can't make it to the game, they're what's called ghosting. Ghosting is their character, and you have to announce this at the beginning when you start your campaign as a dungeon master. You got to announce this so everybody knows and nobody complains about it later. In order to keep all the players together, all the player characters together, if a player can't make it for a game on a particular night, his character is still with the group. He can't take any action. He can't help anyone. He can't do anything. But he's with the group. The only way he dies is if the entire group dies. So as long as one person's still alive, the ghosting characters are still there. Now, this is an important rule in Dungeons & Dragons, especially these days when we're all adults now, so life gets in the way. You won't be able to make every game. So this is an important rule, and it works well. Say you step your general marching order, your second best fighter is on tail sweep, guarding the rear. But that player can't make it that night, so you have a ghosting character in the rear. You better put somebody else back there. That's all I'm saying. General marching order is good, but be ready to... You got to make it flexible. Make sure there's somebody covering specific areas. Okay. Somebody asked me, and then again, discuss your standard marching order with your group. Make sure everybody's on board with it. Mounted opponents. This is the one that gets everybody. Mounted opponents present a huge assortment of new and different problems for any group of player characters. Let me get up a drink real quick. Whenever you're facing mounted opponents, they're faster. They can do hit and run tactics, even in tactical situations. They're higher. They have better weapons. They can come in, attack, and get away. Mounted archers just make all kinds of problems. I'm not even going to go there. My go-to tactic is to kill the mounts. Period. It's harsh and it's brutal, but dead horses are not useful in combat. Fire will scare the animals and break up any formation or organization of the enemy. If you've got a group of mounted fighters coming at you, throwing flasks of oil with burning rags in them, Molotov cocktails, throwing those in front of the animals will spook the animals. A rider at full gallop will take horrendous damage if the horse dies underneath him. A rider who is riding along and fire erupts in front of the horse spooks and jumps a certain direction. The rider's not ready. He could easily fall off. You got to disrupt that formation, and the best way, in my opinion, is to kill the horse. If you can't kill it, you got to scare it. Flying mounts who die tend to drop the rider. So, yeah. I'm riding this big bad dragon up here. Yeah, that's all great. The dragon dies, you fall. I'm not saying killing dragons is easy. I'm just saying. Infravision was another question that people asked me about. Infravision is very useful underground and at night. The problem is that infravision is not night vision or dark vision as in the later games. Infravision, by definition, detects heat signatures. A group of enemy drow elves or deep gnomes can be temporarily blinded by a sudden heat source flaring up, a burst of fire, a fireball, burning hands, a Molotov cocktail, that kind of thing. Now keep in mind, you got to understand this, a light spell will not work because there's no heat. It has to be a heat source. Okay? The round or two of blindness could allow a quick escape or a decisive blow in combat. It doesn't work forever. It's not, you don't blind them for the rest of their life. Depending on how hard they were concentrating, how hard they're searching an area or whatever, if they're engaged in combat, it might not work as well. It may be a round or two at most. But that could be decisive. That's all I'm saying. Okay. I'm going to get into medical treatment, and a lot of people are going to disagree with me on this, and that's okay. You're allowed to. Put it in the comments. People will love to read it. Okay? This is supposed to be informational. Arrow and spear wounds. These can be exceedingly tricky. Most players, they get hit with an arrow and cure light wounds. Okay, but the arrow is still embedded. Okay? You got to get that arrow out before you do the cure light wounds. You got to get that spear out of there, especially for those pesky spellcasters, you know. An arrow to the arm or a spear to the gut has to be removed. As long as it's not near a vital area, it's pretty simple. You break off the tip and pull it out. Now, you cannot leave the tip on and pull it out because the tip will rip more flesh. It makes it worse of a wound. It does more damage. If a person can take that, that's great. I don't know of anybody who would want to take that. So, the correct procedure is to break the shaft just short of the head and then pull it back through. If the arrow is embedded really deep, like in an arm or in the side or whatever, and you can see the tip, it might be better to push it through the other side, break it off, and then pull it out. It just depends on the situation. This prevents the head from ripping more flesh. Clerics can then employ curing spells or some kind of a first aid or whatever, and that's fine. If no clerics are available, then there are no healing, and if there are no healing potions, then the procedure is a bit different. Break the head off of the spear or arrow as before. However, the exposed end of the shaft should be soaked in wine for several minutes. When the tip of the shaft is lit, the shaft should be steadily pulled back through the wound to cauterize any internal bleeding. Then, fire should be used on both ends of the wound. If you do not have wine, but I've heard people use oil, but I don't like that. If your campaign has primitive firearms, muskets and arquebuss, because there are a lot of them that do, if you cut a groove you break the tip off of the arrow or the spear, and you cut a groove into it, you can fill it full of gunpowder and light it just as the guy pulls it out. Okay? Now, the idea there is to cauterize internal bleeding before you cauterize the external bleeding. And the reason that's done is if you cauterize the outside, internal bleeding can still kill someone. Internal infection can still kill someone. Fire should be used on both ends of the wound. If the weapon did not go through, not a through and through wound, then healing potions or magical healing is pretty well has to be employed. Most archers, this is going to sound bad, it's disgusting, but this is historically accurate, and I use it in my games. Most archers put something on their arrowheads. They can stab them into raw meat, or excrement, or whatever, poison of some kind. The idea is to inflict an infection or disease. Fire will generally kill it, but to pull an arrow out will rip more flesh. Wine and fire will close the wound and may kill the infection, so you're better off there. Now, fighter types and clerics in my game already know all about all of this. They're taught it in their basic training. Thieves and wizards can be taught to bind wounds for no cost. They're sitting around a campfire. They ask the fighter, "Hey, what do you do if you get wounded?" "Well, here you go. Boom, boom." See, it's that kind of thing. It's common knowledge. It is assumed that whenever a fighter type or a cleric or a thief or a wizard who has had this training binds wounds, they know enough to take these reasonable precautions. They know how to deal with an arrow wound. They know how to deal with a spear wound. I count fighters and clerics, whenever a fighter or a cleric is doing this, I assume that's what they're automatically doing because they already know. A thief or a wizard does it, and if they've had the training, great. If not, then you got to kind of ask them what they're doing. The first one was missile weapons. I had a guy ask me why his players, he complained that his players rarely take missile weapons. They're not into missile weapons. Now, in modern times, missile weapons actually mean missiles. In advanced Dungeons and Dragons and medieval fantasy games in medieval times, missiles were arrows and spears and slings, things like that. Since Lord of the Rings came out and people saw Legolas using his bow, this is not such a concern. But back in the day, many players never bothered getting proficient with bows or slings. I'm reminded of a story a friend of mine told me. He and his friend had played in my game for years, and they'd gone to play in another Dungeon Master's game, which is great. The more experience they can get, the better. The players in that game were not the brightest bulbs. Many of them were stupid. Okay, there's no other way about it. Anyway, in that game there was a chasm with a bridge across it. On the far side from the group was a huge group of orcs. The group was going to charge them across the bridge and attack. My friend told them to wait while he asked the dungeon master what they were armed with, what the enemy was armed, the orcs were armed with. The DM confirmed that the orcs all had only melee weapons. My friend told the group to use their bows. Many of them didn't have bows. So my friend and his friend, the two guys that gamed with me, and maybe 2 other people had bows and slings and like that, so they were able to use those. They killed or drove off the orcs with no casualties. The ones who didn't have bows, my friend told them, you guys watch the bridge, don't let them get across. They can't come at you, but through this narrow bridge, you can hold off that. We'll take them out with the bows. Missile weapons can be extremely cool, okay? Especially if the enemy doesn't have them. It gives you an advantage that they don't have. A lot of people tend to think arrows only do a d6. I can do better damage with my axe or my halberd or whatever. Yeah, that's fine. But you have to close to melee range. If there's a dozen bad guys and you charge into them with your axe, yeah, they get how many shots? You give me that many rolls, I'm rolling some crits. And you can ask anybody. With a bow, if they don't have a way to fight back, you can pick them off at your leisure. Bows can be awesome. Slings are good too. They throw rocks, or atlatls are good because they throw javelins and spears. Slings use rocks or bullets. A bullet is essentially a metal ball bearing, But the idea there being, yeah, if you've got a missile weapon and the enemy doesn't, you have an advantage over them. Use your advantages. It's that simple. Basic tactics, speaking of that. Many players are the kill variety. And that works in many situations. But using the old noodle can keep your character alive a lot longer. Here's some basic tactical principles. A, never fight a battle you don't have to. Any dungeon master worth his salt will give experience for intelligent play over mindless violence. I know the book doesn't generally say that, but I do that because I prefer an intelligent thinking man's game. B, know when to retreat. If you are outmatched, if you are outnumbered, if you are at a disadvantage, or if the die rolls or the situation are running against you, it's okay to run away. It only takes 1 critical hit to kill a player character, and 1 hit die creatures can roll critical hits. I think there's a provision that says if your armor class is so good that the enemy has to roll a 20 to hit you, it's not considered a crit, and that's cool. But you give me a dozen rolls, I'm rolling some crits. And crits are dangerous. I don't care who you are. I'm reminded just now of an incident that happened. My son was running a game a few years ago. I was running a barbarian. Our group, my wife was playing. Our group was tasked with investigating some old ruins, and we'd found a place to camp up in the top of a tower. And the tower overlooked a cliff, and the cliff was the tower, the wall, and everything, and then the cliff went down another 100 feet or so it was about a 400-foot drop. We were with a bunch of NPCs as part of the group that was exploring these old ruins that had been found in the jungle, and turns out a bunch of primitive Aboriginal tribesmen were coming to attack us in the middle of the night. One of our guards got an alarm off, woke everybody up. We were outnumbered about 200 to 1. Yeah, my wife was like, holy crap, he's trying to kill us. And I said, no problem. I took a rope, I tied it off, I grabbed her, I grabbed all the food we could carry, and I started down out of the tower. We was running away, and my wife goes, you're running away? And I said, yes, I'm running away. I can kill a lot, but one of those guys is going to get a crit. It's all it takes is 1. So we're going down. We got down as far as we could, and I was able to put her on. My character was strong enough, and my barbarian can climb walls and natural surfaces. So I got down far enough to where there was something to hang on to. And I started climbing down. Well, of course, the bad guys up there cut the rope, thinking it was going to kill us, and I was able to climb us down the wall. So yeah, running away is a valid tactic if you're outnumbered. Don't be afraid to run away. My character and my wife's character lived to tell the tale. Nobody else did, but we did. Use your strengths against the enemy's weaknesses. If you have bows and slings and they don't, stay in missile range. If all they have is bows, close to melee range. If they're on foot and you are mounted, right away. Exploit weaknesses. Fire versus cold, stay out of the water versus aquatic creatures, that kind of thing. Okay? If they have an obvious weakness, use it to your advantage. Find a weakness to exploit. Are they slow? Can they fly? Are they short of food and water? Are they sensitive to bright light? Whatever. Anything. Find a weakness to exploit. Limit their avenues of attack and their mobility. In my friend's story above, the chasm was spanned by a narrow bridge. If the group had no missile weapons, they could have held this end of the bridge, their end of the bridge, so only 2 to 3 orcs could attack at once, a la the 300 Spartans at Thermopylae. You see what I'm saying? You limit the enemy's numbers. Surprise is a force multiplier. If you have to fight, try to catch them unawares from the rear while they're asleep, etc. There are many people who go, that's not honorable. No, it's not. But it works. Now, you're going to have some players in the group who are running paladins or something, some cavalry. Oh, I will not attack by surprise. Okay, that's fine. But we will. Here we go. Do whatever works. This is the oldest tactical principle in existence. Do what works. It has proven the test of time again and again since caveman times. If you're concerned with aesthetics or if you are trying not to look stupid, you deserve to fail. The 3 key words are quick, quiet, and efficient. Don't be afraid to make a mess. Don't be afraid of overkill. When your character's life is on the line, overkill is your friend. The next one they keep asking me about is aerial combat. Alright. A dragon or some other huge flying creature while you're flying. Okay, if you're engaging with a dragon or some other huge flying creature while you are flying, you have failed. In the air, dragons will clean your clock. Dragons are fast and maneuverable. They're very powerful creatures. They have missile weapons in the form of breath weapons. They can strafe you. They don't have to close to attack with claw, bite. Dragons are the ultimate aerial combatants. If you are engaging a dragon while in aerial combat, you have failed. I'm sorry, you're not going to succeed. If you are riding a flying mount and your opponent is riding the same or an equivalent approximate mount, then it all comes down to who is more maneuverable and who can deal the most damage. It's that simple. Aerial combat is particularly bloody because all you have to do, if you're both riding a Pegasus, for example, if you kill the other guy's Pegasus, he falls. And no matter how much damage you do to him, he's still going to fall. Falling damage can be deadly. Falling damage is brutal, especially what they land on. Sharp rocks, a rock, the top of a tree, whatever. Yeah, you can die from falling like that. If your opponent is riding a more powerful mount, run away. Hide. Your mount will not want to face that mount unless it's exceptionally well trained. I don't know of anybody who's that well trained, who trains a flying mount like that. Fly through narrow passes where they cannot follow and find a place to hide. It's that simple. If you could pick off the rider, that's theoretically cool, but it's been my experience that trying to pick off a rider exposes you to inordinate fire and is more dangerous than it's worth. If the opponent is airborne and you are grounded, you either need massed missile weapons or you need to hide. Because this guy, if his mount has a breath weapon or he has a missile weapon, he can do strafing runs, which are very difficult to defend against. Look up World War II. You'll see what I'm talking about. Another thing that they keep asking me about is underwater combat. Now, this is extremely dangerous. It's extremely rare. Most people don't want to fight underwater for a reason. Unless you can naturally breathe underwater, you have no business doing this. Okay? If you're using a spell to breathe underwater, 1 dispel magic will kill you. If you are using an item to breathe underwater, make sure your enemy doesn't know it. Again, a dispel magic may kill you. It just depends on the situation. Melee weapons are almost useless unless it is a thrusting weapon. Missile weapons are useless underwater. If you ever try to fire a bow underwater, it ain't happening. If you try to use a sling underwater, it ain't happening. Missile weapons are virtually useless. If you have to fight underwater, grappling and daggers and knives are your best bet. Swords and spears are okay, but they're very unwieldy. I would try to grapple and then either break their neck or slice important arteries. I once had a character who was grabbed and pulled overboard. I drew my dagger and grabbed the guy around the neck from behind. I then sliced his carotid artery and started stabbing him, short little stabs in the kidneys. The fight did not last long. Slicing off important things like hands, feet, and genitals is also good. Don't be afraid to fight dirty underwater, especially if you have only one breath of air. Normally, I try to avoid fighting underwater whenever possible because most of my characters can't breathe underwater. It's not a healthy work environment. It's like attacking a black dragon underground, you know? If it's something you feel it's necessary to go underwater and fight, finish that fight as quickly as you can and get back to the surface. If you're in danger of drowning, fighting the other guy should not be your number one priority. That's all I'm saying.
Bad luck, you say? Okay, everyone has bad luck from time to time. Everyone. In gaming, just like in life, you're going to see some rain as well as some sunshine. That's just the way it is. I've talked about bad luck in several videos. It is the norm. I've seen players who suffer from the worst die rolls imaginable. I've talked about my friend Randy. Randy is one of the best gamers I've ever met. He's been playing at least as long as I have. He's smart, knowledgeable, makes some of the best characters I've ever seen. He makes some of the best decisions I've ever seen. Randy has the worst, and I mean without a doubt, the absolute worst die rolls I have ever seen. I have seen Randy roll, no shit, 8 fumbles in a row. 8. And it's not just his dice rolling low all the time. When he needs a low number, like an intelligence or a wisdom check, whatever, he rolls 19s and 20s. The die rolls the opposite. And it's not just that die, it's whatever dice. It's Randy. Randy is just unlucky when it comes to die rolls. I've seen Randy fumble trying to hit a sleeping foe with total surprise. It's crazy. Well, I now know exactly how Randy feels. My wife and I had a run of bad luck on Christmas Day that made Randy seem absolutely charmed. She and I were fighting a bad guy. My son was running the game. He's an excellent dungeon master. The bad guy was not overpowering. You know, it wasn't like a killer dungeon master or anything. 2 7th level characters should have been able to finish this guy off pretty quick. But no, that did not happen. Between the two of us, in a 2-hour battle, in real time, 2 hours, we managed to roll no less than 17 fumbles. We rolled more fumbles than misses. Normally in a game, you roll more misses than hits. We rolled more fumbles than misses. It was just crazy. On top of that, the 2 critical hits that I did manage to roll netted a grand total of 4 points of damage. 2 critical hits, a total of 4 points of damage. So even when I was doing well, I wasn't doing well. It was a nightmare. The whole battle was a nightmare. It was crazy. I've been playing Advanced Dungeons & Dragons for over 47 years. And I'm telling you that it was downright embarrassing. If we didn't have a crap ton of hit points, we seriously... I think we would both died. We wouldn't have survived. A bit of advice, take it from me. No matter how badass your character is, always, always, always have a way out. Have a way to run away. Like in Monty Python, run away, run away. No matter how powerful you are or how badass your character is, or what character you have, no matter who you are, no matter what your character is, anyone can have a string of bad luck.